The thunderous crack of a whip split the air as Hazel Patterson stumbled forward, her hands bound before her with coarse rope that bit into her wrists. The year was 1875, and the unforgiving New Mexico Territory sun beat down mercilessly on her uncovered head as she was dragged toward a group of men gathered outside the ramshackle trading post. $10 for the girl, drawled Samuel Blackburn, the man who transported her from St. Louis after her father's debts had mounted. He yanked on the rope, causing Hazel to stumble again. She's strong enough for housework, cooking, whatever else you might fancy. His suggestive tone made her stomach turn. At 20 years old, Hazel had never imagined this would be her fate. After her father's death 3 months prior, she discovered he'd signed papers transferring guardianship to Blackburn, a business associate, to settle his substantial debts. The man had promptly decided to transport her west and sell her services to the highest bidder. "I ain't interested in no city girl," growled one of the men, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. "Probably pass out at the first sight of real work." "I'll give you 8, offered another, eyeing her in a way that made Hazel's skin crawl. Tears threatened, but Hazel blinked them back. She wouldn't give these men the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Her honey-colored hair hung in tangled waves around her face, partially concealing the bruise on her cheek where Blackburn had struck her for attempting to flee during their journey. "She comes with papers," Blackburn said, patting his breast pocket. "All legal-like. Her daddy signed her over fair and square." A tall shadow fell across the ground before her, and Hazel looked up to see a man she hadn't noticed approach. The sun silhouetted him, making it difficult to see his features clearly until he stepped forward. "She's a person," he said, his voice quiet but carrying unmistakable authority. "Not a sack of grain to be traded." The newcomer was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered from the sun and partially obscured by several days' worth of stubble. A worn leather vest covered his shirt, and a gun belt encircled his hips. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, fixed on Blackburn with unmistakable contempt. "Owen Nightingale," muttered one of the men, stepping back slightly. "Didn't expect to see you in these parts again." Blackburn sneered. "This ain't your concern, Cowboy." "I'm conducting legal business." Owen's hand rested casually on his holster. "There's nothing legal about selling a human being, last I checked. The war settled that matter some years back." "It ain't like that," Blackburn protested. "She's indentured." "Her father's debts. I don't much care for the particulars," Owen interrupted. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a leather pouch. "How much?" Hazel's heart pounded in her chest. Was this man simply planning to buy her instead? Would her situation improve at all or merely change hands? Blackburn's eyes narrowed calculatingly. $15. "You just offered her for 10, Owen replied evenly. Price went up. Owen tossed the pouch to Blackburn, who caught it with a greedy hand. 20. That covers her papers, too." As Blackburn counted the money, Owen stepped forward and drew a knife from his belt. Hazel flinched away, but he merely cut the bindings at her wrists. "She's a person," Owen said again, this time more loudly so all gathered could hear. "And she's mine to protect now." He turned to Hazel, his voice dropping. "If you'll allow it, miss." Stunned by this unexpected turn of events, Hazel could only nod. Whatever this man's intentions, they couldn't be worse than what awaited her with Blackburn or the others. Owen took the papers from Blackburn's reluctant hand and tucked them inside his vest. "Our business is concluded." He offered his arm to Hazel. "My horse is this way, madam." Hazel hesitated only a moment before placing her hand on his arm, acutely aware of the stares following them as they walked away. "What happens now?" she whispered when they were out of earshot. "That depends on you," Owen replied, guiding her toward a magnificent chestnut horse tethered nearby. "I've got a small ranch about 3 hours' ride from here. I can offer you safe passage to Santa Fe if that's your preference, or work at my place until you decide what you'd like to do. Either way, those papers will be burned tonight." Hazel studied his face, searching for deceit and finding none. "Why did you help me?" Owen's jaw tightened. "Because no person should be handed over like property." He helped her mount the horse before swinging up behind her. "And I've seen what men like Blackburn do to women they consider possessions." As they rode away from the trading post, Hazel felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief, fear, and uncertainty about what awaited her. But for the first time since her father's death, she also felt something else: hope. The vast landscape of the New Mexico territory stretched before them as Owen guided his horse along a faint trail. They rode in silence for the first hour, Hazel acutely aware of the stranger behind her. His arms encircled her as he held the reins, maintaining a respectful distance while still providing support to prevent her from falling. "You said your name is Owen Nightingale," she finally asked, needing to break the silence. "That's right." His voice was close to her ear. "And yours?" "Hazel Patterson," she hesitated. "My father was Thomas Patterson. He was a merchant in St. Louis, and now you're a long way from home." "I don't have a home anymore," she said quietly. "After Father died, I discovered we'd lost everything. The house, the business, all gone to creditors." Owen was silent for a moment. "And Blackburn was one of those creditors?" He was Father's business partner. "I didn't know about the arrangement until after the funeral when he presented the papers." Hazel's voice caught. "Father had signed them 6 months earlier. He never told me." "I'm sorry," Owen said, and she believed his sincerity. No father should place such a burden on his daughter. They crested a small hill, and Owen reined the horse to a stop, allowing them both to drink from his canteen. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain. "We should reach my place before dark," he said, looking at the horizon. "Are you holding up all right? We can rest longer if needed." Hazel straightened her spine. "I'm fine. I'm stronger than I look." This earned her a small smile. "I don't doubt that, Miss Patterson. You've endured more than most would without breaking." As they continued their journey, Hazel gradually learned more about her rescuer. Owen had come west after fighting for the Union in the Civil War, unable to settle back into his previous life in Pennsylvania. He'd worked as a ranch hand before saving enough to purchase his own modest spread 3 years earlier. "It's nothing grand," he warned as they approached a small valley nestled between rocky hills, "but it's peaceful." The ranch came into view as the sun was setting, a modest cabin with a small barn and corral beside it. A few cattle grazed in a nearby pasture, and a thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney. "You left your fire burning?" Hazel asked, concerned. Owen chuckled. "No, that'll be Henry. He helps me with the place, older fellow who can't work the bigger spreads anymore, but knows more about ranching than I ever will." As they approached, the cabin door opened, and an elderly man with a white beard emerged, shotgun in hand. Upon recognizing Owen, he lowered the weapon. "Didn't expect you back till tomorrow," he called. "Who's the lady?" Owen dismounted and helped Hazel down. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. Owen's hand steadied her elbow. "Henry, this is Miss Hazel Patterson. She'll be staying with us for a time." Owen's tone made it clear no further explanation would be forthcoming at that moment. "Miss Patterson, this is Henry Oakes, the finest cook in the territory and a fair hand with cattle." Henry nodded, studying Hazel with kind but shrewd eyes. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, miss. I've got stew on the stove if you're hungry." Hazel realized she hadn't eaten since dawn. "That sounds wonderful, thank you. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. A main room served as kitchen and living area with a stone fireplace along one wall. Two doors led to what Hazel presumed were bedrooms. "You can take my room," Owen said, gesturing to one of the doors. "I'll bunk with Henry." "I couldn't possibly." Hazel began to protest. "You can and you will," Henry interrupted, ladling stew into bowls. "The boys slept in worse places than my floor, I can assure you." Over the simple but delicious meal, Hazel found herself relaxing slightly. Neither man pressed her for details about her situation, though she could see questions in their eyes. When she stifled a yawn, Owen immediately stood. "You need rest. We can talk more tomorrow." In the small bedroom, Hazel found a basin of water had been placed on a stand, along with a clean towel. The simple kindness brought tears to her eyes as she washed the dust of travel from her face and hands. The bed was narrow but comfortable, and exhaustion quickly overcame her wariness of sleeping in a stranger's home. She awoke to sunlight streaming through a small window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up, heart pounding. A soft knock at the door preceded Henry's voice. "Miss Patterson, breakfast is ready when you are, and I've put some clothes outside your door. They belong to Owen's sister. Might fit you better than what you're wearing for ranch work." "Thank you," she called. "I'll be out shortly." The clothes were simple: a sturdy skirt, two blouses, and a shawl, but clean and only slightly worn. Hazel changed gratefully, noting they were indeed a better fit than her travel-stained dress. In the main room, Owen and Henry were already eating. Owen stood when she entered, a gesture of politeness that seemed at odds with their rustic surroundings but touched her nonetheless. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, taking the seat he offered. "Thank you for your hospitality." As they ate, Owen explained more about the ranch. "It's small, as you can see. 20 head of cattle, a few horses. We get by." "What Owen isn't telling you," Henry interjected, "is that he's also the territory's finest horse trainer. Folks bring their animals from as far as Albuquerque for him to work with." Owen looked embarrassed. "It's just something I have a knack for." After breakfast, Owen invited Hazel to accompany him outside while he tended to the horses. As they walked to the corral, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I hope you understand I had no improper intentions yesterday. I couldn't stand by and watch what was happening." "I'm grateful," Hazel said simply, "but I don't wish to be a burden. I can work. I'm handy with a needle, and I can cook and keep house." Owen nodded. "We'd welcome the help. Henry's cooking is edible, but that's about the best that can be said for it." His expression grew serious. "But I want you to understand something, Miss Patterson. You're not obligated to stay here. The papers Blackburn had, I burned them last night. You're free to go wherever you choose, whenever you choose." The reality of her situation struck Hazel anew. She was truly alone in the world, in a place far from anything familiar. "I don't know where I would go," she admitted. "I have no family, no money." "Then stay," Owen said simply, "until you figure it out, no strings attached." A magnificent black stallion approached the fence, and Owen reached out to stroke its nose. The animal pushed against his hand affectionately. "This is Midnight," Owen said. "I've been working with him for a rancher in Santa Fe. He was considered unrideable before." Hazel watched in admiration as Owen vaulted the fence and approached the stallion. The horse nuzzled him, displaying none of the wildness she would have expected from an unrideable animal. "You have a gift," she observed. Owen shrugged. "I just speak their language." "Horses are honest creatures. They respond to respect and kindness, and they know when they're being mistreated." He glanced at her. "People aren't so different, I suppose." Over the next week, Hazel settled into a routine at the ranch. She took over much of the cooking and housekeeping, mended clothes that had clearly needed attention for some time, and even began helping with some of the outdoor chores. Henry taught her to collect eggs from the small henhouse without getting pecked, and Owen showed her how to approach the horses safely. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry on a line outside the cabin, she heard the approach of horses. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw two riders approaching rough-looking men she didn't recognize. Instinctively, she moved toward the cabin door where she knew Owen kept a shotgun. "Afternoon, madam," called one of the men as they drew closer. "We're looking for Owen Nightingale." "He's out checking the herd," Henry said, emerging from the barn. His hand rested near the knife at his belt. "Something I can help you with." The men exchanged glances. "Might be better if we wait for him. Blackburn sent us." Hazel's blood ran cold at the name. She glanced at Henry, who had stiffened slightly. "You're welcome to wait," he said carefully, "but I should warn you, Owen doesn't take kindly to uninvited guests." The men dismounted but remained near their horses. Their eyes kept drifting to Hazel in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Pretty thing," one commented. "Blackburn said she might be here." "I don't see how that's any business of Mr. Blackburn's," Hazel said, finding her voice. "Or yours." The man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Feisty, too. Blackburn didn't mention that." The sound of hoofbeats announced Owen's return. He rode up quickly, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Laramie, Tucker." He nodded curtly to the men. "What brings you to my property?" "Just a friendly visit," said the one called Laramie. Blackburn wanted to make sure his investment was being properly cared for. Owen dismounted, his movements deliberately calm. "As I recall, our transaction was completed. Miss Patterson isn't anyone's investment." Tucker spat on the ground. "Blackburn says those papers weren't yours to buy. Says the girl belongs to him by right." "The papers no longer exist," Owen said evenly, "and people don't belong to other people in this country anymore." "Blackburn figured you'd say something like that," Laramie said. "He's offering to buy her back, double what you paid." Hazel felt sick. The idea that men were still discussing her as if she were a commodity made her both frightened and furious. "I'm not for sale," she said loudly, stepping forward. "And I'm standing right here. If Mr. Blackburn has something to say to me, he can come say it himself." Owen moved to stand beside her. "You heard the lady. Now I think it's time you gentlemen moved on." The two men hesitated, clearly not having expected this level of resistance. "Blackburn won't be happy," Tucker warned. "That's not my concern," Owen replied. His hand rested casually near his holster. "Safe travels." After a tense moment, the men mounted their horses and rode away, but not before Laramie called back. "This ain't over, Nightingale." When they were out of sight, Hazel released a shaky breath. "I'm sorry to have brought trouble to your door." Owen's expression was grim. "You've brought nothing. The trouble is Blackburn's making, not yours." He looked at Henry. "We should take precautions." That evening, after Henry had retired, Hazel found Owen sitting on the porch, rifle across his lap as he watched the darkness. "You don't have to stand guard," she said, sitting beside him. "I could leave. Go to Santa Fe, perhaps." Owen shook his head. "Blackburn would only follow you there." Men like him don't give up easily when they think their pride's been wounded. They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of the desert surrounding them. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Hazel finally asked. "You don't even know me." Owen was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was soft. "I had a sister, Caroline. She was 17 when I left for the war." His knuckles whitened around the rifle. "When I came back, she was gone. Turned out, Our neighbor had taken advantage of her vulnerable position with me away and our parents dead. He'd convinced her to marry him, promising security. His jaw tightened. By the time I found her 2 years later, she was unrecognizable, broken. He treated her worse than a man would treat a dog. Hazel's heart ached for him. What happened to her? She died in childbirth a month after I found her, the baby too. Owen looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the moonlight. I couldn't help my sister, but I could help you. Impulsively, Hazel reached out and touched his hand. You did, and I'm more grateful than I can say. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Owen gently turned his hand to clasp hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. A distant noise broke the moment, the sound of a horse approaching. Owen was on his feet instantly, rifle at the ready. Get inside, he ordered quietly. Wake Henry. Heart pounding, Hazel did as instructed. By the time she and Henry returned to the porch, Owen had stepped into the yard, rifle aimed at the approaching rider. That's far enough, he called. The rider stopped and raised his hands. Easy, Nightingale, I come in peace. Marshal Davis. Owen lowered his rifle slightly. What brings you out here at this hour? The marshal dismounted. Information you might find useful. Mind if I come up? Over coffee at the kitchen table, Marshal Davis explained his presence. Got word Blackburn's been gathering men in town. Overheard him saying something about retrieving stolen property from the Nightingale ranch. Owen's face darkened. Miss Patterson isn't property, the marshal nodded. I know that, but Blackburn's convincing some folks otherwise. Says he has legal papers. Had, Owen corrected. Those papers were a sham and they no longer exist, Marshal Davis sighed. I figured as much. Problem is, Blackburn's got friends in places that matter. Judge Willis owes him favors. Hazel felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Are you saying the law won't protect me? I'm saying the law out here is sometimes flexible. The marshal looked genuinely regretful. I'll do what I can, but you should be prepared. Blackburn's planning something, and soon. After the marshal left, promising to return the next day with reinforcements, Owen, Henry, and Hazel discussed their options. We could head for Colorado, Henry suggested. I have a cousin in Denver. Owen shook his head. We'd never make it. Blackburn would have men watching the trails. He looked at Hazel. There might be another way. It's unconventional, but it would give you legal protection beyond what Blackburn could challenge. What is it? Hazel asked, ready to consider anything that might end this nightmare. Marriage, Owen said, his expression serious. As my wife, you'd have protections that Blackburn couldn't easily overcome, even with the judge in his pocket. Hazel stared at him, shocked. You can't be serious. It would be in name only, Owen hastened to add. An arrangement solely for your protection. Once Blackburn gives up or is dealt with legally, we could quietly annul it, Henry coughed. I'll give you two a moment to discuss this. He retreated to his room. Alone with Owen, Hazel tried to gather her thoughts. You would do that. Marry a stranger. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Owen pointed out. And yes, I would, unless the idea is completely repugnant to you. It's not that, Hazel said quickly. It's just, marriage is a serious commitment, even if temporary. Owen's eyes held hers. I don't make offers I don't mean to honor, Hazel. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent an unexpected warmth through her. If we did this, she said slowly, what would happen afterward? Would you expect me to leave? I would expect you to do whatever you wanted, Owen replied. Stay, go, the choice would be yours. Always. Hazel thought about her limited options. Return east with no money and no connections. Try to make her way alone in a frontier town. Or stay here, where for the first time in months she'd felt safe and respected. All right, she said finally. I accept your proposal, Mr. Nightingale. A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Under the circumstances, I think you can call me Owen." The following morning, Marshal Davis returned as promised, accompanied by the circuit preacher who happened to be in town. Within an hour, Hazel found herself standing before the preacher in the main room of the cabin, wearing her cleanest dress and a wildflower Owen had picked for her hair. The ceremony was brief and simple. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Owen hesitated only a moment before leaning down to place a gentle, chaste kiss on Hazel's lips. The unexpected tenderness of it made her breath catch. "Congratulations," the marshal said, clearly still bemused by the hasty wedding. "I'll make sure word gets back to town promptly. That should buy us some time while Blackburn reconsiders his approach." But they had underestimated Blackburn's determination. The sound of horses came less than 2 hours after the marshal departed. Looking out the window, Hazel counted 6 riders approaching, Blackburn in the lead. "Get to the back room," Owen ordered, checking his rifle. "Henry, take the rear window." "I'm not hiding," Hazel said firmly. "This is my home now, too." Owen looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "Stay inside, at least." The standoff that followed was tense. Blackburn and his men remained mounted just beyond easy rifle range. "Nightingale," Blackburn shouted. "Send out my property and we'll leave peacefully." Owen stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. "There's no property of yours here, Blackburn. Just me, my wife, and my ranch hand." This announcement caused a stir among Blackburn's men. "Wife," Blackburn spat. "You think a hasty ceremony changes anything? I have papers." "Those papers were illegal and are now ash," Owen interrupted. "Miss Patterson is now Mrs. Nightingale, legally wed before witnesses, including Marshal Davis. Any attempt to take her would be kidnapping a married woman, a hanging offense in this territory." Hazel watched through the window as uncertainty spread among Blackburn's followers. One leaned over to whisper something to Blackburn, who scowled in response. "This isn't over," Blackburn called, but Hazel could hear the hesitation in his voice. Taking on a single rancher over a woman with questionable legal status was one thing. Challenging a legal marriage was another entirely. "It is over," Owen replied steadily. "Ride away, Blackburn. There's nothing for you here." For a tense moment, Hazel feared Blackburn would order his men to attack anyway. But after a final venomous glare, he yanked his horse around and led his men back the way they'd come. The 3 occupants of the cabin remained vigilant for hours afterward, but no one returned. As sunset approached, Marshal Davis rode up again, alone this time. "Blackburn and his men left town," he reported. "Word at the saloon is he's heading back east. Seems he decided the girl wasn't worth the trouble after all." Relief flooded through Hazel, though she tried not to show how profoundly the news affected her. "Thank you, Marshal, for everything." After the marshal departed, promising to keep an eye out for any sign of Blackburn's return, an awkward silence fell over the cabin. The immediate danger had passed, but now Hazel and Owen faced the reality of their hasty marriage. "I'll sleep in the barn," Owen said as night fell. "Give you privacy." "That's hardly necessary," Hazel protested. "Your room has space enough for a pallet on the floor, at least." In the end, they compromised. Owen made a bed of blankets on the floor while Hazel took the narrow bed. As she lay in the darkness, listening to his steady breathing, Hazel contemplated how drastically her life had changed in less than 2 weeks. "Owen," she whispered, "are you awake?" "Yes," came his quiet reply. "Thank you for everything you've done." There was a pause. "You don't need to thank me, Hazel. Nevertheless, I am grateful," she hesitated. "What happens now?" She heard him shift on his makeshift bed. "Now we go on living, running the ranch, and when you're ready to move on, we'll arrange it." The thought of leaving brought an unexpected pang. What if I don't want to move on? The silence stretched so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he said, "Then you'd stay. As my wife or not, that would be your choice. And if I chose to stay as your wife, a real wife, not just in name." Owen sat up, and though she couldn't see him clearly in the darkness, she felt his gaze on her. "Is that what you want, Hazel?" She realized with sudden clarity that it was. In their short time together, she had come to admire this quiet, honorable man who had risked everything to protect a stranger. "I think it might be," she admitted softly. "In time, if you were amenable." He moved then, coming to kneel beside the bed so they were face to face. "I've been amenable since the moment you stood up to Blackburn's men, unafraid despite everything." His voice was low, intense. "But I won't rush you, we have time." Hazel reached out in the darkness, finding his hand and entwining her fingers with his. "Yes," she whispered, "we have time." The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and growing closeness. Owen taught Hazel to ride properly, and she discovered a natural affinity for horses. She expanded the small garden behind the cabin, adding vegetables and herbs that improved their daily meals considerably. Henry watched their developing relationship with obvious approval, occasionally finding reasons to make himself scarce to give them privacy. Owen remained true to his word, never pressuring Hazel for more than she was ready to give. They continued their sleeping arrangement, though sometimes they would stay up late talking, learning each other's histories, hopes, and fears. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the landscape in brilliant oranges and reds, Owen turned to her with unusual seriousness. "I received a letter today," he said, "from a rancher near Santa Fe who wants me to train several horses for him. It would mean good money enough to expand our herd significantly." Hazel smiled at his use of "our." Over the past weeks, Owen had increasingly included her in discussions about the ranch's future. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," she said. "It would mean being away for several weeks," he continued. "I've never left the ranch for that long before." Understanding dawned. "You're concerned about leaving me and Henry alone." Owen nodded. "Blackburn seems to be gone for good, but I'd never forgive myself if something happened while I was away. Henry and I are quite capable," Hazel assured him, "and Marshal Davis checks on us regularly." She reached for his hand. "You should go. The ranch needs this opportunity." Owen looked at their joined hands. "There's something else I've been meaning to ask you." He seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Our marriage, it began as an arrangement of convenience, but for me it's become much more." His blue eyes met hers. "I need to know if you still see it as temporary." Hazel's heart quickened. "No," she said softly, "not for some time now." The relief on Owen's face was palpable. "I've been afraid to hope," he admitted. "You're educated, refined, you could have a very different life than the one I can offer." "The life you offer is exactly the one I want," Hazel said firmly. "I've never felt more at home than I do here, with you." Owen's hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "I love you, Hazel. I think I have since that first day when you stood so brave despite everything." "And I love you," she whispered. "My protector who saw me as a person when no one else did." When he kissed her this time, there was nothing chaste about it. His lips claimed hers with a passion that had been building for weeks, and Hazel responded in kind, her arms wrapping around his neck to draw him closer. That night, for the first time, Owen didn't sleep on the floor. The next morning, Henry took one look at their entwined hands at the breakfast table and broke into a wide grin. "About time," he muttered, serving them extra portions of flapjacks. 3 days later, Owen departed for Santa Fe, promising to return as quickly as possible. The separation was difficult, but Hazel found herself flourishing in her role as temporary mistress of the ranch. She discovered previously unknown strengths as she handled day-to-day decisions, assisted Henry with the livestock, and even negotiated with a wool buyer who came to purchase their small sheep herd's spring shearing. Owen returned after 6 weeks, bringing not only payment for his work, but also gifts fabric for new curtains, seeds for Hazel's garden, and most precious of all, a simple gold band to replace the makeshift ring he'd placed on her finger during their hasty ceremony. "I thought we might renew our vows," he suggested as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "A proper ceremony this time with guests and celebration, a beginning of our choosing rather than one forced by circumstance." On a perfect autumn day 2 months later, Hazel stood beside Owen before the same preacher who had married them initially. This time, however, the cabin was filled with neighbors, friends from town, and even Marshall Davis in his Sunday best. Hazel wore a new dress of pale blue, and wildflowers adorned her now healthy hair. As they repeated their vows this time with full hearts and complete certainty, Hazel reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. What had begun in fear and desperation had transformed into something beautiful and profound. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife for the second time, Owen's kiss left no doubt in anyone's mind that this was a union of love, not convenience. At the celebration afterward, Marshall Davis approached with surprising news. "Thought you might like to know Blackburn was arrested in Kansas City. Seems your situation wasn't the first time he tried to trade in people illegally. He'll be spending a good long while behind bars." The news was the final weight lifted from Hazel's shoulders. That night, as she and Owen stood on their porch looking out at the land they now truly shared, she felt a profound sense of peace. "I never thought I'd be grateful for being handed over like property," she mused. "But if it hadn't happened, I might never have found you." Owen drew her into his arms. "You were never property, Hazel. You were always a person worthy of respect and love. I'm just fortunate I was there to remind the world of that fact. And to make me yours to protect," she added with a smile. "To protect, to cherish, to love," Owen agreed, kissing her beneath the vast star-filled sky of their western home. "Today and all our days." 2 years later, as Hazel rocked their infant daughter Caroline in the expanded cabin that now boasted glass windows and proper wooden floors, she watched Owen teaching their young son Thomas to gentle a foal. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, growing to 3 times its original size. Henry remained with them, now more like family than employee, delighting in his role as honorary grandfather. Sometimes Hazel still marveled at how completely her life had transformed from a possession to be traded to a woman fully in command of her destiny, loved and respected by the man who had seen her true worth from the beginning. The American West was often harsh and unforgiving, but it also offered second chances to those brave enough to seize them. In the arms of her cowboy, Hazel had found not just protection, but a love that had transformed them both.